Hello everybody and welcome to the British Pint. My name is Christoph and today I'm going to brew a beer that I'm not familiar with at all and that doesn't really fit into this British Pint channel, but something that I really would like to do and that I also think would be very interesting for you to see me do. And that is the Munich Hell. Hell means pale, so this is a pale beer, bottom fermenting, that was traditionally made in southern Germany for a long time. This one particularly specifies the origin of Munich. And there's one issue with this beer, and that is if I drink it, I don't really like it. The main thing about this beer is that you try to bring the malt to the forward, and I don't really like the taste of Pilsen malt, which you might have noticed if you have seen previous videos of me. So the first thing I'm going to do to get any chance of doing a beer that I will like in the end is I get a certain malt. And the malt that I got is Maris Otter Extra Low Color. So this is 2 to 3 EBC, really pale, and the description was that this is still very grainy, very pale ale flavorish. So my expectations are that this will be as pale as it has to be, but a bit stronger in flavor, and also a different flavor. I think that's more important than whether it's a stronger flavor. So the recipe is something that is a bit tricky, because if you want to do it traditionally, you should use the decoction method. So you have to boil part of the mash to bring up the to open up the starches, and then you mix that into the mash to bring up the temperatures. So you do your temperature control by adding boiling mash instead of just heating it up as an infusion mash, as is usually done. So for me, this will be just testing decoction mash, having never done it before. For you, this might be quite interesting in seeing how this Munich Hell is supposed to work. I am shamelessly stealing or just using the tips that are given in German brewing articles from a really good magazine. It's called Brewing Magazine, and just the Brewing Magazine. And yeah, I guess this will be qualifying me to give you this information. If anybody who from the German side of my viewership has any issues with what I say, please just post it in the comments. I'm pretty sure I won't do everything perfect, but we need a starting point. Especially for me, this will be quite useful to watch back in the future when I want to check what I could do better. So the first thing I had to do was I had to boil some water. So I have here a pot with 7 liters of boiled water. Following the tips that I found on the internet, I boiled this for half an hour to get rid of the calcium carbonate in my water. I have normally a residual alkalinity of 5.9. I think I uploaded my water profile previously, so I'll just show it here, show you my water profile, show you what happens when I boil it, and then I will also add some acid malt to the mash. So I will use, I do my normal amount of 4.5 liters, so 1 UK gallon of beer. I will use 40 grams of acid malt to get the pH to 5.4. From what I understand, for this type of beer, this is quite essential. You also want to have soft water. You want to have something that reduces any harshness in the hop. So that's why I do that. My water now has, after boiling and with the acid malt, quite a bit of sulfate. So that might be a bit too much. It might accentuate the hop, but that's not much of an issue for me. So I do 2 steps to optimize the water, which are convenient, and I'm not going any further with osmosis filtering or mixing it with distilled water or anything like that. So the water in here is boiled. I see that there's a lot of chalk on the bottom. I will decant this slowly. There's actually a bit of limestone on the top surface, if anybody can give me an idea how to get rid of that. Gently stirring didn't make it precipitate. But I will slowly decant this. I will then split it up into my main liquor and sparge liquor. So I'm always using the same amount just because I'm lazy. I just want to do always the same and not have too many variables. So 4 liters main liquor, 3 liters sparge liquor. And then there was a really nice tip in the article that I read about decoction mashing, and that is you should mash in the pot. Let the liquid and the grains separate. Then you take the top, which is the thin part of the mash, out, and then because to get from 35 degrees, which is a good mashing temperature, to 65 degrees, I need to boil half of the whole liquid. Exactly half. It works out quite nicely. So I'm going to take half the volume, add it into my mash kettle, then I'm going to boil the rest for, what was it? It said something like 10 to 15 minutes, so just a short boil. There is a recommendation that when you heat it up, you could stop for a short time at 70 degrees to get a bit of saccharification, and then you start boiling. I might do that, not entirely sure though, I will comment it on the screen. And then I have a mash when I combine everything at 65 degrees, let it sit there for 20 minutes, and then I will boil a thin part of the mash. So I take another few liters, I think it's a third, exactly 1/3 that I take in volume, and that will be then heated up again to boiling point and add it again, so this brings me up to 75 degrees. Then there will be a second rest for complete saccharification of the whole mash, and that will be I think another 20 minutes, and then I should be done. I will also do a test with iodine to see whether this is completely finished. And then the last thing that I have to do is to sparge, and for that I will add the other 3 liters of liquid on top. So I will see how this progress goes. If everything worked fine, I will just enter the clips while I'm talking. Hopefully that works. And then afterwards we come to the hop boil. So they recommend very neutral hops, ideally something that is either German or continental European. Now I have almost only UK hops in my freezer, and they do also recommend continental hops like Styrian Golding, which is of course just Fuggles, and that means a very English hop. So maybe it's not as strict as it might seem. You should not take any harsh, like Target would be a very harsh bittering hop, or some of the American ones. I think Columbus, maybe, I heard that it's harsh as well. So here I have Brewer's Gold, which is, I think, nowadays more German hop. It used to be English, of course, because of the name. And it has 5.2% alpha acid. I'm going to use 7 grams to get me close to 20 IBU. Boil for an hour, add 2 grams at the last 10 minutes to give a very slight, very faint, this is a very weak hop, hop aroma. Well, it's more taste, right? It's barely any flavor, so, barely any smell. So it's just a flavoring, late hop addition, no whirlpool, no dry hopping. And then this will be basically it. Then the yeast I'm going to use is the Wyeast 2308 Munich Lager. The reason I'm using this instead of my usual house strain, which is the Augustiner strain, for example, Imperial Yeast Harvest Lager or the Munich Lager 2, is because I actually misclicked when buying this. So I'm getting the other one next week or in 2 weeks. But for now I have the Munich Lager 1, which is the normal one, which I heard can be harsh, can introduce harsh flavors. I'll see how this works. Something that's quite annoying for me is you get so many yeast cells with these big packs that with my small amounts of liquor or wort, I don't really have any reason to use it all up. So what I might do, what I'm not 100% sure about, is I might do the same recipe again tomorrow with pale ale malt just to get a comparison, and then use the other half of the yeast pack. So that would be no problem. So I would smack it now and then use some of it tomorrow. I think that would be everything. So we'll see how the whole decoction mash works. That is the crucial thing. Oh yeah, of course, fermentation temperature. So outside we have a clear blue sky now, and that means very cold temperatures. It is November, end of November now, and we have negative degrees outside in the night, and it gets quite warm during the day. So that is far too much of a range to put anything on the balcony like I did at the beginning of 2021. So I usually only do that when I have really cloudy sky, very stable temperature. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this in the one cellar room that we have that has almost continuously open window because of all the heating systems that are in there. And that one is really cold. I think it was 12 degrees yesterday. I'm going to double check the thermometer later. And so chances are that if there's any fluctuation, it will be significantly reduced. It will be warmer than outside, which is of course an issue because you can have esters. It's not that much a problem for me, because for me anything that's bottom fermented tastes significantly cleaner than any English brew I do. But if you want to replicate this recipe and you have the possibility to actually control your fermentation temperature, you should really ferment this at something like 8, 9, 10 degrees. This would be much cleaner and really reduce the whole flavor to what you would get from the malt and not from the yeast. They actually don't specify temperature here. I'll have to look up the website. Okay, so I will do my best to get a stable temperature and a low temperature, and then we'll see how the beer turns out. So that would be pretty much it. I think I'm ready to go. I hope everything works well. I hope the boiled mash doesn't ruin my sparging experience or anything like that, but we will see at the end of the video. I might talk to you when everything's over. Hey guys, so we're done with beer. I got 11.2 degree Brix, which is a bit low. There was a tiny amount of liquor still left in the mash and that didn't want to get out, so I got a little bit of loss. But 11.2 is still fine for the style, so that works fine. I cooled this one down quite a lot, so I think it's below 20 degrees, and I will put it downstairs in the cellar. The cellar has 13 degrees, which is at the top upper range of the yeast. So that's a bit annoying. It might go down a bit in the future. We have really cold days outside, which also means that there's no way for me to put the liquor outside at all. So the highest temperature we will have in the next few days is 9 degrees, and the yeast is recommended for 9 to 13 degrees. So I have the choice between having 1 hour during the whole week of 9 degrees or having it constantly at 13 degrees. I think I will go with the 13 degree option. I have the yeast already downstairs and it inflated really well, so it got the swelling done and it was really active. That's very nice. I'm going to put half of it in here and then save half of it for tomorrow, where I will do the whole thing again with pale malt just to see. I wanted to have a comparison. I think it's a good way to do it, just to see also how the yeast works. So yeah, I have something. It's always best to have 2 beers with the same yeast and very little change, so that I can understand how the yeast tastes and everything like that. I expect that it will still be very neutral even if I ferment it at 13 degrees, just because for me every bottom fermented beer tastes very neutral compared to the English ones. And that's pretty much about it. What I wanted to say is I forgot to properly explain the decoction method. So what you do is you have 100% base malt, and by decoction you actually do something that is very similar in flavor to bringing in caramel malts. So by boiling the whole mash, you actually introduce Maillard reactions and caramelization, which means that you end up with a very complex flavor and a lower final gravity, higher final gravity, lower degree of attenuation. So this is a traditional method before there were any caramel malts of how to get a specific flavor. And nowadays, of course, it's much easier to do infusion mashing and using caramel malts, but the flavor is not exactly the same. So getting it done like this is to some degree unique. So that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to do it. And what I could say as well is the decoction didn't work perfectly for me. So when I put the half of the mash, having boiled it, into the wort, basically, not in the wort, in the mash, but basically what happened is I went up to 60 degrees, not 65, and when I did the second boiling, the same happened. I went up to 70 degrees, not 75. So one of the issues there is that in the mash kettle I have a lot of losses in terms of heat, because I have a very low amount of volume in my mashes, and that means I have a very high surface to volume ratio. So if I would fill this to the brim, it would be actually much more insulating than it is to me with these small amounts. So that is something that I would have to take into account. Also, every time I boiled it, I lost water, and that means that the amount that I poured back was less than I calculated. And so these two things, loss of water and actually insufficient insulation, were the ones that gave me a bit of trouble. Tomorrow I will try to do the same again with the pale mold and then maybe optimize the amount of water a bit. So I will also have to boil water again so that I get my decarbonated water. So that it was a bit annoying because I will probably have to boil 8 liters and then see if I use all the 8 so that I can pour a bit back and everything. It's probably much easier if you just have a large amount of water that is in the proper proportions of the minerals, and then you just use as much as you need. For me, in the small amounts and getting everything like manually done, it's a bit more tricky. But yeah, I don't think there's any fundamental issue with this one, and I'm really interested to see how this one goes forward. And then during the tasting video, you will see how I compare this one to the one made of 100% pale mold. Alright, so that would be it, and I'm going to look forward to seeing you during the tasting video. So see you then. Bye bye.